Hey guys, it's Graham, and what's cracking is the algorithm is spying on me and definitely trying to. Is it even subliminally influencing you if it's just doing it overtly? Where it seems like any platform I'm on, like everybody is like constantly bringing up the same thing in the last couple of weeks. This in question then is Starship Troopers. Whether it's the movie or the book, I've seen the movie like once, and then it'll go through these weird cycles online where all of a sudden everybody's talking about it for a while, and there's arguments over whether Paul Verhoeven's version of it was good versus like, oh, if you didn't realize that it was a satire of fascism, then you're just an idiot. Like, people have dumb arguments about it all the time. I don't personally care beyond the extent of like how faithful of an adaptation is it of the book, because I prefer books to movies, and I especially prefer source material to derivative adaptations, with very few exceptions. And I up until today I'd only read the book once, and let's just get into it. So recently, a new narration of it came out, which I was wary of picking up only because I'd heard a couple of years ago that the publisher was going to release an updated, for modern audiences, toned down and edited version of Starship Troopers. I was like, wait, what the hell? But there was some debate as to whether that was real or not. I think they were talking about changing friendly language or unfriendly language or insensitive language or whatever. Like, they were going to give it the treatment that they've been doing to other classics, where they effectively wrangle the words of a superior writer away from him to create a lesser product because they could never reach his level, and so all they got to do is just tear down the greats. Every sci-fi writer I know, swears by Heinlein, and I've read a handful of his books. I think he's really good. I want to be honest about my own assessment of the guy. Like, I didn't grow up as a little kid reading Heinlein. I heard about it, but I didn't pick up his stuff until I was an adult. I did make the unfortunate mistake of reading John Scalzi before I read Heinlein, kind of in the same way that I read Terry Goodkind before I read Tolkien. And I thought, okay, this is fine. And then you go and read the stuff that it was very clearly and deliberately riffing on, and you're like, oh, yeah, this other version's not good. What is Starship Troopers, now that we're a few minutes into this one? Well, if you're only familiar with the movie, just go ahead and yeet that out of your brain. All right, we're not talking about anything from the movie at all. While this is a bit of a sci-fi where there are mech suits in the future and there's space travel and there are alien races and stuff, this is sort of a military sci-fi or space sci-fi or one of those sci-fi subgenres. It is first and foremost a profoundly philosophical work, analyzing the mechanisms and methods of government that humans have cooked up over the centuries and the millennia to figure out which one is the most effective. The first time that I read this, I was 28. I remember that I was training for my first Tough Mudder, and most of the time when I would go on a long run, I would put on my running playlist, but there were also times when I would put on an audiobook, and this was one of them. Like, I remember being on one of my 5 or 6 mile runs and listening to Starship Troopers and finishing it up at the gym. I can't remember who the narrator was of this other version, and since it's been so long, I also can't tell you if there were any differences in this version. I'm just going with it because this new narration is very, very good. It's narrated by R.C. Bray, incredibly talented. He's not like a top 2. He's probably a top 5, definitely top 10. Anything I've listened to by him is like, yeah, this guy's really good. Reliable. Sorry, I've got debris bouncing around here in the truck. The main character is named Johnny Rico. He is from Buenos Aires, and he does enlist in the military out of high school. They operate in a system where there are citizens and there are civilians, and the only people that get to have a say in the government are veterans of the military. And so you only gain your full citizenship and your voting rights if you've served in the military. And you can do a 2-year service, and then you get those voting rights. You can run for office and stuff. Very few people make it through, and there's a discussion of that. There's a discussion when he goes to recruit. There are flashbacks to discussions in high school of a class that one of his professors taught, and his professor was a veteran, and it was like history of like morality and moral philosophy or something. Discussing the merits of service and when to engage in combat, and what does it mean and why do we do this. And yeah, there's cool stuff about Johnny going to boot camp and learning how to be a roughneck and how to tough it out and how to get over the hump and what military training is like. And there's also the training where he gets the jumpsuits and with the cap troopers training and stuff, where they learn how to like get shot out of ships and land on planet surfaces. And yeah, there's an alien bug race that they've got to fight, and the bugs do wipe Buenos Aires off the map, and his mom dies, and like all of that stuff is there. But the real meat and potatoes and merit of this book comes in the discussions that the characters have, analyzing their philosophy and their methodology, questioning why they do things a certain way and whether there's a better way to do it. And there's even a segment when Johnny has to, like he's applying for an officer's billet, like he wants to become a career man, and so he goes to become an officer, and that requires additional schooling and stuff. And he has to go take another one of these history of morality and like moral philosophy classes, but it's obviously like an accelerated one. But the teacher keeps demanding that like you need to show your math when you're talking about when one decision is morally preferable to another. Like specifically, he says like show your math. Go write out the value of this this proposition that you've got. There's also discussion on how like sometimes there are things that you just can't put a value on. Like, is one potato as valuable as 1,000 potatoes? Well, no. But is one human life as valuable as 1,000 lives? Well, human beings, if one person is missing, 100 others will drop what they're doing to do what they can to figure out, like especially in a tight-knit community or in a village setting, drop what they're doing to go find the one that's missing. It's one of those things that's kind of unique in nature, and it's because man is, among other things, a philosophical creature. This is the quality and attribute of this book that has given it staying power over time. If you were to strip this element away or else water it down, this would just be another military sci-fi book about a guy who decides to go enlist in the army, and basic training is hard, and then he decides that he wants to make a career out of it, and then he goes and fights bugs in the end. And there are 1,000 other mil sci-fi space opera books like that are, some of them are even readable. This one's written in first person, and so you get a really strong and compelling voice from Johnny. Like you like the way that he sees the world, you like the military lingo that he uses that works its way into everyday life. All of that is great, but the real durable value of the story that Heinlein wrote here is these philosophical discussions that the characters have, and they have it in such a way that is natural and organic to the voice that Johnny brings to this specific tale. I guess there was an announcement recently, and that's probably what triggered all of this online activity around Starship Troopers. There was an announcement, and I've already forgotten which director it is, that they're going to take another crack at making Starship Troopers in Hollywood. If they're faithful to that source material, they could do a great job of it. I do believe that in addition to the peculiar tastes of Paul Verhoeven, who made the 1997 movie, in addition to his own personal sensibilities driving the particular tone and angle that movie took, this book is, on some philosophical level, profoundly anti-communist, but it gets into why. Or at least it jumps in and explains the the moral and mechanical failings of communism, and yet they're able to analyze some of Karl Marx's ideas from Das Kapital and say, however, there is one advantage of this mindset that others haven't been able to crack, and so here's what its contribution is. Again, like this is a philosophical work disguised very cleverly as a future space opera military science fiction. When I read it this time, with more than a decade of reading behind me and having grown as an adult, the first time that I read it, my wife was only pregnant with our oldest son. Now we've got 3 kids. I've read a lot more widely, and I've got a different view of the world. I definitely appreciate this book a lot more for what it truly is. It reminds me of, in what year was it? 2017 or 2018, when I finally got around to reading Murder on the Orient Express for the first time. I think that might have been the first Agatha Christie book that I ever read. It was a title that I'd always heard of, and people who had read it always talked about it in kind of these, like, not reverent tones or hushed tones, but like excited tones, like, wow, that's a really great book. It's like, didn't she just write murder mysteries? Like, how many different ways are there to write a murder mystery? It's like, well, in addition to it being you're just saturated with her particular writing style and the eccentricities of her protagonist, Hercule Poirot, who was always enjoyable to read. The mystery itself really transcended the norms and the tropes of the genre. And if you haven't read it, I'm going to hold off on saying what it is, but when Poirot is investigating what actually happens in this murder on a train, what happens is so much more spectacular than a run-of-the-mill murder case. And not only is that idea very strong, the execution is very strong, and that's what gives that book staying power. The same is true of Starship Troopers, which I believe was published in the 60s, but don't quote me on that. That book is, it's been around for 60 plus years at this point, and the complexity and profundity of its philosophical ideas have kept it around, because those ideas are kind of timeless and have always been relevant, and are even more relevant today than they were the last time that I read it. So this is, not that you needed it, my hearty endorsement of Starship Troopers, but in particular, this new narration by R.C. Bray. I don't know if it is of any kind of updated manuscript where they took out mean, naughty words or ideas. So when I go to add a physical copy of this book to my library, I'm going to do some digging and try to find a much older copy of it. Probably one that's a little bit worn and whatever, but that way it's got more of the original text. That's what I've got of some of the Agatha Christie books that are on my shelf. I made sure to find like older printings, maybe not original printings, but closer to original, so that they haven't been messed with so much. Anyway, if you've listened to this new version, let me know what you think. Till next time, you know the drill. Drive safe. See you out there.